Billionaire family slaps black CEO at Gala seconds later. She destroys their $1 B deal. Hello. Everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. Getoutoughere. The words cut through the grand hall like shattered glass. Music stalled mid-note. Conversations collapsed into silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Beneath the arched ceiling of the Gala marble floors, oil portraits, old money staring down from gilded frames, every eye turned to the same place. At the center stood her, tall, still, wrapped in a deep cobalt blue gown that caught the light without asking for it. Her arms were folded not defensively, but deliberately, like someone used to standing through storms without flinching. In front of her, an elderly white woman leaned forward, finger-raised face, flushed with authority that had never been questioned. Not here. Not in this room. Not in decades. I said, "Get out of here," the woman snapped again, louder this time. This is a private event. A ripple ran through the crowd. Phones lifted. Whispers bloomed. A woman in a gold dress sucked in her breath. A man in a tailored tuxedo frowned, unsure whether to intervene or pretend he hadn't seen anything at all. Somewhere near the back, a server froze, mid-step tray trembling. The woman in blue didn't move. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain.
She didn't look around for help. She simply met the older woman's eyes, calm, unblinking, unreadable.
That calm was unsettling, because people who don't belong usually rush to prove they do. The matriarch took a step closer, invading her space. "Who let you in?" she demanded, voice sharp enough to draw blood. "Security," the word echoed. Heavy. "Hey." Final. A murmur followed. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered, "Is this real?" Another voice cut in low and cruel. "She doesn't look like one of us." Still, the woman in blue stood her ground. Her posture never changed. Her breathing never hitched. If anything, she looked patient. As if she'd been here before. As if she knew something the room didn't. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The older woman's finger hovered inches from the woman's chest now. Too close. Intentionally so. A line drawn in the air. "This is a charity gala," the matriarch said, lips tight. "$1 billion donors. You don't belong anywhere near this circle." A hush fell again, the kind that presses against your ears. The woman in blue glanced around just once. Not to plead, to observe. Faces full of curiosity. Judgment. Excitement. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. Silence had chosen a side. She returned her gaze to the woman in front of her, and for the first time the room felt something shift. Not anger, not fear. Control. Whatever this was, whatever mistake had just been made, it was already too late to undo it. She had learned long ago that silence unsettled people more than anger ever could. The woman in blue didn't step back. She didn't step forward either. She remained exactly where she was, heels planted on marble that had been polished by generations of people who believed this world belonged to them. Around her, the gala slowly restarted, but only halfway. Conversations resumed in fragments. Laughter sounded forced, mistimed. Eyes kept drifting back to her, measuring, judging, searching for cracks that never appeared. Someone near the champagne table whispered. She lost. Another voice followed, lower, sharper. "She doesn't look invited." She heard all of it. She always did. Her gaze moved calmly across the room, not scanning for exits, not seeking allies, just observing. The symmetry of the hall, the oil paintings, the donors whose names were etched into plaques but whose faces no one remembered. Old power loved permanence. It loved walls like these.
She had walked through rooms like this before.
Boardrooms where conversations stopped when she entered. Fundraisers where her name was mispronounced, then quietly omitted. Meetings where she was offered coffee instead of a seat at the table. Different rooms. Same energy. The matriarch shifted her weight, clearly unsettled by the lack of reaction. People were supposed to flinch when spoken to like that. They were supposed to explain themselves. "Are you hard of hearing?" the older woman snapped. "I told you to leave." Still nothing. A man in a burgundy tuxedo took a cautious step closer to the matriarch. "Ma'am," he murmured, "perhaps we should—" She silenced him with a look. "This is my event," she said, loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. "And I decide who stays." The implication landed exactly where it was meant to. The woman in blue finally moved, but only slightly. She uncrossed her arms, letting them fall naturally to her sides. The gesture was small, almost casual, yet it shifted the temperature of the room. People straightened. Phones steadied. This wasn't the body language of someone cornered. It was the posture of someone waiting for the other person to finish embarrassing themselves. A woman in a gold dress raised her phone higher, framing the scene. Her finger hovered over the screen, torn between excitement and unease. A server nearby swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the exits. No security yet. Just tension thick and humming. The woman in blue exhaled slowly. For a brief moment, so brief no one else noticed, her mind drifted. A conference room years ago. Glass walls. 12 men. One empty chair she had to ask for twice. The same tone. The same certainty that she didn't belong until proven otherwise. She had proven herself then.
She would not do it now.
Her eyes returned to the matriarch, steady and level. Whatever game was being played here, she wasn't reacting on their terms. And that was the first thing in the room that truly frightened them. Everyone in the room knew who she was. They might not have remembered her first name, but they knew the family. The legacy. The fortune that stretched back generations and forward into influence no one openly questioned.
She didn't need an introduction.
The way people made space for her did that automatically. The matriarch straightened, sensing the room's attention drifting away from her control toward the woman who refused to leave. She hated that. Her entire life had been built on certainty, on being obeyed without explanation, on the quiet understanding that when she spoke, rooms rearranged themselves accordingly. And yet, here stood this woman in blue, unmoved. "Do you have any idea where you are?" the matriarch asked, her voice low, now sharpened by insult rather than volume. "This gala funds institutions, families, futures. You don't just wander in." A few guests nodded instinctively as if agreement were muscle memory. She gestured around the hall with a sweep of her hand, marble crystal history. "People earn their place here." The woman in blue listened, head slightly tilted, expression unreadable. That was the problem. Most people would have rushed to speak, to justify themselves, to list credentials like armor. She didn't. The matriarch felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest, not fear, but irritation edged with doubt.
She turned to the crowd, searching for reinforcement.
"Security has been called," she announced, as if sealing the matter. "This will be handled." A murmur rippled outward. Relief for some, discomfort for others. A younger man near the front frowned. "Is that really necessary?" he asked quietly. The matriarch snapped her head toward him. "Absolutely." Her gaze returned to the woman in blue. "You should be grateful I'm being discreet." Discreet. Phones were raised. Every word was being captured from 3 angles. The irony went unnoticed by everyone except the woman being threatened. She shifted her weight, subtly, heels clicking once against the marble. Not retreating. Not advancing. The matriarch took that single sound as defiance. You see, she continued, voice tightening, we work very hard to protect the integrity of this circle. Appearances matter. There it was. Not policy. Not protocol. Appearance. A hush settled again, heavier than before. Even those who agreed felt the sting of the word hanging naked in the air. The woman in blue met her eyes fully now. No challenge. No submission. Recognition. As if she had finally decided the matriarch was worth acknowledging. That look, calm, measuring, landed like a mirror held up too close. The matriarch faltered for half a second. Then pride rushed in to fill the gap. She stepped closer, finger lifting once more, reclaiming her posture of command. I won't repeat myself again, she said. You don't belong here. Around them, the room waited, unaware that the woman being dismissed had already decided something far more consequential than whether she would stay or go. The room did what crowds always do when power wavers. It leaned in. Whispers threaded through the air, soft but contagious.
Heads tilted closer together.
Glasses paused mid-sip. What had begun as a private act of correction was now unmistakably public. A woman in a gold dress adjusted her grip on her phone, the screen glowing as she zoomed in. This is insane, she murmured, half to herself, half to her followers. Somewhere behind her, a man muttered, someone's going to regret this, though it wasn't clear who he meant. The woman in blue felt it all, the weight of hundreds of eyes, the quiet thrill that comes when people sense a moment turning. She remained still, as if the noise belonged to another room entirely. Near the edge of the hall, a young server glanced toward the exit again. He had been trained to disappear, to blend into wallpaper, but tonight the walls were watching too. He swallowed and took a careful step back, not wanting to be remembered as part of this. A couple standing near the orchestra whispered urgently.
Shouldn't someone step in and say what that was the problem?
Everyone felt the wrongness. No one knew how to interrupt it without paying a price. The matriarch sensed the shift and raised her chin, projecting calm she didn't fully feel. There's nothing to see here, she declared. Please enjoy the evening. No one moved. The woman in blue noticed something subtle, then a man lowering his phone instead of raising it. His brow furrowed, not with curiosity, but recognition. He studied her face longer than was polite, as if searching his memory. Another guest followed his gaze. Then another. The crowd's energy fractured. Some leaned toward outrage. Others toward doubt. A woman whispered, she's not panicking. A man replied, why would she? That question lingered unanswered. The matriarch turned slightly, her voice dropping into something sharper, more personal. You're embarrassing yourself, she said. And all of us. Embarrassment was supposed to sting. To shrink people. The woman in blue's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked bored. A ripple of unease spread. Power thrives on reaction. Without it, it begins to look like theater. Someone laughed softly, then stopped when no one joined in. At the back of the hall, a gray-haired man rested both hands on his cane, eyes fixed on the scene. He'd seen moments like this before. He didn't intervene. He rarely did. But he remembered how they ended. The crowd waited suspended between spectacle and consequence. And in that waiting, something irreversible began to take shape, not in the woman being watched, but in everyone watching her. The matriarch lost patience. It showed in the tightening of her jaw, in the way her fingers curled, as if grasping for control she could feel slipping. She turned sharply toward the nearest security guard, her voice slicing through the murmurs. Escort her out! The words landed hard. A uniformed figure shifted at the edge of the crowd, hesitant. He glanced at the woman in blue, then back at the matriarch. Training told him to obey. Instinct told him something was wrong. This is unnecessary, someone muttered. Just do your job, another voice snapped back. The woman in blue remained still as the space around her tightened. The crowd unconsciously formed a wider circle, as if humiliation needed room to breathe. You see, the matriarch said, turning back to her satisfaction creeping into her tone. This ends now. A sharp laugh broke out nearby, too loud, too eager. Unbelievable, a man scoffed. People really think they can walk anywhere these days. The comment stung because it was meant to. The woman in blue felt it, then not anger, not fear, but the familiar weight of exposure. The way humiliation tries to shrink you in public, tries to convince you that everyone agrees you deserve this. For a fleeting second, the past crept in. A much smaller room, cheap carpeting, a receptionist's tight smile. We don't have a record of you. The same look, the same certainty that she was out of place until proven otherwise. She pushed the memory aside. Here, now. The matriarch stepped closer again, her voice lowering into something meant to wound rather than command. You should have known better, she said. These spaces aren't for everyone. A phone camera zoomed in. The lens didn't blink. Someone whispered, "This is getting ugly." Someone else replied, "It already is." The security guard took one step forward, then stopped. He hesitated long enough for the room to notice. The matriarch caught it immediately. "What are you waiting for?" she demanded. The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I just do it," she snapped. That hesitation was all it took. The woman in blue lifted her chin slightly, meeting the guard's eyes, not pleading, not challenging. Simply present, human. The guard's shoulders tightened. He had been trained for disruptions, for drunken guests, for chaos.
This wasn't that.
The matriarch turned back to the crowd, gesturing broadly. "I apologize for the disturbance," she announced, voice polished once more. "Some people don't understand boundaries. Boundaries." The word rang hollow in a room where one had just been crossed. The humiliation had reached its peak, public, deliberate, undeniable. And somewhere beneath the polished floors and glittering lights, the foundation of the evening cracked. Because humiliation once witnessed doesn't stay contained. It demands an answer. It didn't start with a protest. It started with a look. A man near the center of the room, mid-40s, understated tuxedo, the kind worn by people who didn't need to impress, studied the woman in blue again. Longer this time. His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing not in suspicion but in recognition. "I've seen her before," he murmured. The woman beside him leaned in. Where he didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed locked, searching through memory. Boardrooms. Headlines. A photo he'd scrolled past without stopping because it hadn't been about him. Another guest overheard. Seen who the man lowered his voice. "I'm not sure yet." Across the room, the matriarch mistook the shifting energy for compliance. She straightened, smoothing an imaginary crease in her sleeve, already rehearsing how this would be retold later, how decisively she had handled the disruption. But the room wasn't following her script anymore. The security guard still hadn't moved. His pause had become visible, uncomfortable. A woman near the bar whispered, "Why isn't he touching her?" Her companion replied, "Because he doesn't want to be the one on camera." Phones were still raised, but the tone had changed. This wasn't spectacle now. It was evidence. The woman in blue noticed the man watching her, the one with the thoughtful eyes. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't need to. Recognition, when it comes, works better uninvited. The matriarch's voice cut back in. "Enough," she said sharply. "We've indulged this long enough." Indulged. Another word that landed wrong. The man finally spoke, louder this time. "Excuse me," he said, polite but firm. "May I ask, who exactly are you escorting out?" The question rippled. The matriarch turned on him, irritation flashing. "That's none of your concern." "It became everyone's concern when it turned public," he replied calmly. A beat. No one had challenged her like that all evening. A woman nearby nodded, emboldened. "He's right," she said softly. "This feels excessive." The matriarch laughed, once sharp and humorless. "Please, don't be navy. Navy. The woman in blue finally shifted her gaze just slightly toward the speakers, still silent, still composed. But now, the silence felt different. Intentional. Another guest leaned toward the man. "Do you think she's, I don't know yet?" he said. "But I don't think this ends the way she thinks it does."
At the edge of the hall, the gray-haired man with the cane adjusted his stance. "I've seen this before," he murmured to no one in particular. Power always overplays its hand right before it loses. The matriarch felt it then. The room wasn't with her anymore. Not fully. She stepped closer to the woman in blue again, her tone dropping into something tighter, more personal. "You're enjoying this," she hissed. The attention. The woman in blue met her eyes. For the first time, there was a flicker of something unmistakable there. Not defiance.
Certainty.
And in that moment, the first crack became visible to everyone watching. Because people don't stand like that unless they know something you don't. It happened in a second. The kind of second that rewrites everything that comes after. The matriarch stepped forward again, close enough now that the scent of her perfume cut through the air, sharp, expensive, intentional. Her voice dropped, meant only for the woman in blue. "I am done with this." And then she reached out. Not forcefully. Not violently. But deliberately. Her fingers closed around the woman's upper arm, just above the elbow. A grip practiced through years of moving people where she wanted them subtle enough to deny, firm enough to control. Gasps rippled outward. Phones jolted. A woman near the front whispered she touched her. Another voice followed, stunned. Did she just? The security guard froze. Training screamed at him to intervene. Reality screamed at him not to move. The woman in blue looked down at the hand on her arm. For a heartbeat, the room existed in suspension. She thought briefly of another hand. Years ago. A different setting. A man who thought ownership extended to bodies, to space, to silence. That memory flickered and vanished. This was not that woman anymore. She lifted her eyes, slowly meeting the matriarch's gaze. Her voice, when it came, was low. Even. Unmistakably calm. "Remove your hand." The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. They landed like steel on marble. The matriarch blinked, caught off guard. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not in this room, not in this tone. For a split second, confusion crossed her face. Then pride surged to cover it. "Excuse me," she scoffed, tightening her grip instead of releasing it. "You don't give me orders." That was the moment. The crowd felt it before they understood it, the click of a lock, turning the soundless crossing of a line that could not be uncrossed. A man near the bar muttered, "Oh, no! Someone else whispered she should let go." The woman in blue didn't raise her voice. She didn't pull away. She simply repeated herself, "Remove your hand." The security guard took an involuntary step forward. His radio crackled, forgotten.
Cameras zoomed closer, hungry now, no longer entertained.
The matriarch's smile faltered. For the first time all evening, she realized the room wasn't watching the woman in blue anymore. They were watching her. And in that charged silence, with her fingers still wrapped around an arm she should never have touched, the balance of power finally unmistakably shifted. The woman in blue didn't pull away. That was what unsettled everyone. Most people would have reacted, flinched, recoiled, raised their voice. She did none of it. She stood perfectly still, eyes steady, breathing slow, as if the hand on her arm were an inconvenience rather than a threat. The matriarch felt it then. Not dominance. Resistance. Not loud. Not chaotic. Immovable. "You heard me," the older woman snapped, trying to reclaim the room. "You don't belong, that's enough." The interruption was quiet. Clean. It didn't compete for attention. It commanded it. Every sound in the hall seemed to drain away at once. Even the phones stopped moving, as if their owners instinctively knew this was a moment that didn't need Zoom. The matriarch's hand loosened just a fraction.
The woman in blue spoke again, her voice level measured, unmistakably controlled. "You will remove your hand," she said, "and you will step back. No threat. No insult. No explanation. A statement of fact." The matriarch stared at her, searching for weakness, for uncertainty. She found none. What she saw instead was composure sharpened by experience, the kind that comes from having power questioned too many times to waste energy proving it. Around them, the room leaned forward. The security guard's jaw tightened. He was no longer watching the woman in blue. His eyes were fixed on the matriarch's hand, waiting to see which way this would go. A man whispered, "She's not bluffing." Another replied about what the matriarch scoffed, but the sound lacked its earlier confidence.
Slowly, reluctantly, she let go.
Her hand dropped. The release echoed louder than a shout. The woman in blue took a single step forward, not into her space, but into the center of the room, reclaiming it. "Thank you," she said softly. It wasn't politeness. It was closure. She turned slightly, addressing no one and everyone at once. "This situation is being handled," she said, calm as still water. "There's no need for further escalation." Escalation. The word landed differently when spoken by someone who sounded like they knew exactly what it meant. The matriarch opened her mouth, then closed it. The crowd had shifted again, subtly but decisively. The certainty she relied on was gone, replaced by something dangerous. Doubt. Tout. The woman in blue reached into a small clutch at her side, not hurried, not dramatic. Just deliberate. She withdrew her phone and glanced at the screen. One tap. Nothing else. No announcement. No explanation. But something about the ease of the motion sent a ripple through the room. Because people who are cornered don't move like that. And people who are about to act never rush. The woman in blue looked down at her phone. Not to check messages. Not to stall. To confirm. The screen glowed softly against the dim gold of the hall. A few names. A familiar interface. She didn't scroll. She didn't hesitate. She tapped once. The sound was barely audible, but the effect was immediate. Somewhere deep in the crowd, a man felt his phone vibrate and stiffened. He glanced down, then up at her, his expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. Another guest checked their screen brows, knitting together. The matriarch noticed none of this at first. She was still recovering, straightening her posture, reclaiming dignity like a shawl pulled too tight. "This has gone far enough," she said, voice brittle. "I will not be disrespected at my own event." The woman in blue lifted her gaze. "This is no longer your event," she said calmly. The sentence didn't land all at once. It rippled. A man near the front frowned. "What did she say?" Another whispered. "Did you hear that?" The matriarch laughed sharply. "You're confused." "No," woman in blue replied. "You are." She raised the phone slightly, not as a threat, not as a display, just enough to make the point unavoidable. "Cancel the deal," she said into it, her voice quiet but precise. Effective immediately. A pause. Then yes. All of it. The matriarch's smile froze. "What deal?" she snapped. "You have no authority," the Eastbridge partnership, the woman in blue continued unfazed. "All pending approvals. All future funding." The name hit the room like a dropped glass. A collective intake of breath. Heads snapped up. A few people turned instinctively toward the matriarch, whose face had begun to pale. "That's impossible," she said too quickly. "You don't even know I know exactly what it's worth," the woman in blue said. 1 billion. On paper. More in leverage. Silence. A man near the bar whispered that's their lifeline. Another replied that deal keeps 3 foundations alive. The matriarch took a step back without realizing it. "Who are you?" she demanded. The woman in blue ended the call and lowered her phone. "I was willing to let this be a misunderstanding," she said evenly. "You chose humiliation instead." Around them,
Phones buzzed now, not with recordings, but alerts. Messages. Updates traveling faster than anyone could stop them. The security guard's radio crackled to life with a voice that sounded suddenly unsure. The matriarch's mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time all evening, she was the one searching the room for answers, for support, for something solid to stand on. And finding none. Because the call had already been made, and whatever came next could not be undone. The matriarch tried to speak. Nothing came out. Around her, the room had gone unnervingly quiet, not the stunned hush from earlier, but something colder. Calculating! The kind of silence people adopt when they realize they're standing on the wrong side of history. Who are you? She asked again, more carefully this time. The woman in blue didn't answer right away. She took a slow step forward, heels clicking once echoing across the marble. Not toward the matriarch, but toward the center of the room. Toward the audience that had been watching, recording, judging. She let them see her face fully now. Calm. Composed. Finished. My name, she said evenly, is irrelevant to what just happened. A few brows furrowed. A few phones dipped lower. What matters, she continued, is that you were comfortable humiliating someone you thought had no power. The matriarch shook her head, still clinging to disbelief. This is absurd, she whispered. You can't possibly, I can, the woman in blue said gently. And I did. She turned slightly, addressing the room as much as the woman in front of her. I am the CEO who approved the capital structure behind that partnership, the majority shareholder who made it viable, and the one person in this room who could end it with a single call. A wave of recognition rippled outward. Someone gasped. Someone swore under their breath. Someone finally lowered their phone completely. The man who had been watching her from earlier went still. Oh my God, he murmured. It is her. The matriarch's face drained of color. You? Her voice cracked. You're bluffing. The woman in blue met her eyes, not unkindly. Check your phone. The matriarch froze.
Slowly, reluctantly, she pulled her device from her clutch.
Her fingers trembled as the screen lit up. One notification, then another, then several more stacking faster than she could read. Her shoulders sagged. The room exhaled as one. The woman in blue said nothing more. She didn't need to. The truth had arrived on its own, uninvited, undeniable.
She had never needed to announce herself.
They had simply mistaken silence for absence. And now, with every eye finally open, the balance of the room completed its turn away from old certainty toward the woman they had just tried to erase. The shift was not loud. It never is when real power changes hands. No one clapped. No one cheered. The room simply folded. Shoulders slumped. Eyes dropped. The confident posture that had filled the hall minutes earlier dissolved into something smaller, quieter. The matriarch stood, frozen phone still glowing in her hand. She read the messages again, as if repetition might undo them. Funding suspended. Partnership terminated. Board notified. Each line was a door closing. Around her, people began to move, not away from the woman in blue, but away from her. The distance grew subtly, instinctively, like air evacuating a collapsing space. A man who had laughed earlier stared into his drink. A woman in gold slipped her phone back into her clutch, suddenly uninterested in being seen. The security guard exhaled a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The woman in blue watched none of it. She had already moved on. The matriarch finally looked up, desperation breaking through the polish. This was a misunderstanding, she said, voice thin. We can fix this. Fix. Sick. The word echoed uselessly. There is nothing to fix, the woman in blue replied. Not cold. Not cruel. Final. Only consequences. That was when the full weight of it settled in. The room had chosen. Not loudly. Not ceremoniously. But completely. A few guests nodded to the woman in blue as she turned small gestures of acknowledgement that would have meant nothing an hour ago and now meant everything. One man lowered his head slightly, a silent apology. Another stepped aside without thinking, clearing her path. The matriarch remained where she was suddenly smaller than the space she once dominated. No one reached for her. No one spoke for her. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was total. And as the woman in blue walked toward the exit, the gala didn't stop her. It made room. The doors at the far end of the hall opened without ceremony. No spotlight followed her. No music swelled. Just the quiet sound of space yielding as the woman in blue walked forward, each step measured unhurried, like time itself had decided to move at her pace. Behind her, the gala resumed in fragments. Glasses clinked too loudly. Laughter returned thin and uncertain. People pretended the room had not just witnessed something irreversible, but the room knew. She passed the last row of donors, the last cluster of whispered conversations, the last flicker of screens now lowered out of shame rather than discretion. No one stopped her. No one dared. Outside the hall, the air felt different, cooler, cleaner, honest. She paused just beyond the doors, not because she needed to, because endings deserve intention. Inside, the matriarch remained frozen in place, surrounded by space that no longer bent toward her. The title she wore, the name she carried, the certainty she had lived on, all of it still existed. It simply no longer mattered. The woman in blue adjusted her shoulders and took a breath that felt earned.
She had not come here to make a statement.
She had come to attend a gala, but statements have a way of forming themselves when people mistake restraint for weakness. She turned once briefly, not to look back at the woman who had tried to erase her, but at the room as a whole. The institution. The system. The unspoken agreement that some people must always explain themselves while others never have to. Her voice carried just far enough to be heard by those nearest the door. "I didn't raise my voice," she said calmly. "I raised the standard." No applause followed. None was needed.
She stepped through the doors and let them close behind her.
Inside, the gala would continue. Donations would still be made. Photos would still be posted. Tomorrow's headlines would soften what had happened into something more comfortable, more palatable. But everyone who had been in that room would remember the moment they realized something important. That dignity doesn't ask for permission. That power doesn't announce itself. And that silence, when chosen, can be louder than any command ever shouted across a marble floor. The woman in blue disappeared into the night, untouched, unchased, unbroken. And somewhere deep within the walls, she had just left behind an old certainty, cracked for good. Not because she demanded justice, but because she embodied it.